Hi everyone, Melissa here from Empowered, and today we're going to be talking all about why your diet and moving and exercising is possibly not quite enough to really get you the results that you're looking for. So I see this quite often where women are doing a whole lot of stuff in terms of changing their diet and worrying about what they're eating, and they make it all about diet and supplements, and then they incorporate maybe yoga and exercise, and for some women this does shift things quite a lot, and that's why we think, okay, well, I've just got to do more of that, or I've got to do more intensity with the diet, maybe I've just got to be stricter, maybe I've just got to eliminate more foods. And so then unfortunately what starts to happen is you get to this really restrictive diet. Maybe you don't go out as much because now, it's like, oh, I can't eat half the things on the menus anymore, or you don't want to be embarrassed by saying in front of a whole lot of people, oh, I can't have this, and I can't have this, and I can't have this. It's just, for most of us, we don't really want that kind of attention. And it also feels like you're kind of stuck in this routine of, okay, I'm just going to eat less and less foods, or I'm just going to cut out things that may be inflammatory, or your focus is just on avoidance. And I don't feel like this is really moving you forward in terms of really healing the body. It's just, okay, these foods cause an inflammatory reaction, let me just cut that out. And yes, that is obviously going to support you, and that is the first step in most cases. But what we're not doing is looking at, well, why is there an inflammatory reaction? Why do these foods cause you pain and problems? And let's dig deeper as to the root triggers of that. And that is why we need to move beyond just diet and supplements and exercise. And the other thing I will say is that food choices and diets, yes, they play a part, and yes, there are things that contribute, and yes, certain ways of eating will support your body better, etc. But it's not the big picture, and that is not what holistic healing is. Holistic healing is looking at everything, every component that could be playing a part in your healing journey. And I'm going to share with you today is kind of the last 3 steps that most of us don't do, and I know I didn't do for a good part of my healing journey, is I focused solely on diet, supplements, and exercise, and like I say, I did get improvements, but it didn't shift things. Okay, so if you're here with me today, feel free to leave a comment, feel free to ask me questions. I'm here for you, so if there's stuff that doesn't make sense, if you want clarification, if you want other Facebook Lives that I haven't done, so please do check, because we have done a few of these now, so do check in the video categories if there are Facebook Lives that I've done before where you can check stuff out that I've covered. But I'm going to jump over to my presentation thing now. So just give me a second. Okay, so we're going to be covering, hang on, that was an older one. I'll just start a new one. So we're going to be looking at why the diet is not enough. So we're just going to say basically we're moving beyond diet and exercise. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to go through this with you. So there's a couple of things that are typically going on with endometriosis. And the key thing that's going on is high inflammation. Okay, so that is the biggest thing that's going on. And that is ultimately triggered by endometriosis being an autoimmune condition. So autoimmune basically means that your body will attack its own cells and create more inflammation than is necessary. A really simple example of this is hay fever. So if you think of hay fever and you've got kind of an overreaction to pollen, where your eyes get all puffy and you get a runny nose, etc., that is an overreaction to pollen. I mean, pollen's not that dangerous, and yet your body reacts that way. And so with these dispersed cells in the abdominal cavity, your body is doing the same thing. It's having this overreaction of those cells. And this is what's triggering this inflammatory response. And so inflammation is really at the heart of everything. And this is really where your focus is going to be. So typically what we were looking at here is reducing inflammation with your diet. And so this means eliminating foods that trigger inflammation. So the obvious ones are dairy and gluten. So these are the key ones that we want to avoid. There are others out there, and depending on the sources and depending on your body, etc., is whether they're going to cause an inflammatory response. So these are the key ones to worry about, and then the others are really a case of you just playing around and testing them on yourself. It's never a good idea to eat anything on a regular daily basis. So it doesn't matter what food it is, no matter how healthy it is. You just want to have a scenario where you've got lots of different varieties of food and not the same thing every single day, because that's generally not going to give you the best result in terms of nutrition, but also really figuring out what is causing you that reaction. So if you're unsure about a particular food, cut it out for 4 weeks and then introduce it on a large quantity, and you'll soon know whether that food is not really ideal for your particular body. Okay, the second thing that we then look at is exercise, and using exercise as a form to reduce inflammation. So to reduce inflammation using exercise, we really want to have things that slow down your stress levels, and this is different for everyone. So I've had some women comment and say, I don't know why women don't take up running. Like, I feel like running is like the best thing for endometriosis. But for some of us, running causes more stress, more cortisol, more, that spiking of cortisol is then going to have a whole effect on all your hormones. So it really depends on you. I personally am not a big fan of recommending high impact stuff with endometriosis, particularly because women tend to be more anxious, more stressed, and so the cortisol levels are probably high anyway, so we don't really want to be contributing to that. So I tend to recommend things like yoga, Tai Chi, things that encourage breathing. And the reason for breathing or deep breathing is the more that you breathe, the more you can lower that inflammatory response. There's studies on links with this. So deep breathing, belly breathing, really slows down the heart rate, slows down that fight or flight response that a lot of us are sitting in. And that is going to be a trigger for inflammation in the body. So we want to slow that down, and things like yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, anything where you're present. It doesn't even have to be forms of exercise at all. It could be that you really enjoy painting or drawing or things like that. And those things will slow you down, allow you to be present, and actually de-stress, decompress all of that stress that you're feeling. It's stopping that monkey brain, because that is like that heightened stress response that you're sitting in. And some of us sit in that for years and wonder why we keep getting sick, because that's just not healthy. Your body can't keep up with that. It's using up a lot of cortisol, and then you get the cortisol result. So if the whole hormone thing, just watch the hormone video, because I have covered that in there. Okay, so getting on to the other key 3 things. So the key 3 things that we want to look at, so beyond exercise and diet, so we want to look at the emotional components of why you are inflamed. So ask yourself, what am I inflamed about? So this is different interpretations, but generally it's anger is the key one. Another one might be shame. It might be guilt. So anything that is an ongoing emotional feeling that you feel quite often is going to trigger what I call a stress trigger. And so when you feel that emotion, your body releases stress. Whenever you think of something that relates to that, so maybe something happened to you when you were a child, and every single time you are placed in a similar situation or circumstance, it brings up that same feeling. So that feeling could be, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I can't cope, it's all too much, etc., etc. And it could be any situation, and you are placed in that situation, and it brings you back to when you were a kid and you had those same feelings. And so you are in this stress response from that event. So what we like to do is actually address the initial process from that beginning. So why did you feel that way as a child? What can you do to shift that emotional pain from that experience? So maybe something bad happened to you. You can still have the memory of that experience, but you don't necessarily need to have the pain, emotional pain of that experience come up every single time you think of it. So if there are things that have happened to you in your past that when you think about them now, you still get this welling up, or you're tearful, or you feel in some way any of these emotions, shame or guilt, or in any way impacting you. A lot of women with endometriosis have actually got sexual abuse or, physical abuse in their history. And so if you think about it, it's this kind of cramping up. So when you think of that event, if there are still emotions coming up for you, that is a huge opportunity for you to release that from your body. That pain is sitting in your cells and triggering inflammation in your body. So we want to release that from the body. And there are so many tools available out there now to support you with this. We do have a whole range of them in our program. So if you haven't checked out the REACH program, check that out. There is a whole range of different tools available in there to support you through this. Now, we call this the affirm part of the REACH technique. So for those of you who are new here, we have what we call the REACH technique. So REACH is an acronym. We've got R, which is replenish, which is diet, E is exercise. Then we move on to affirm, which is also about really loving yourself and getting to a place of acceptance. Now, when you think about what an autoimmune condition is, it is about the body attacking itself. And quite often, women with endometriosis have this kind of dislike of themselves, or they're not happy with who they are. And so if you think about that, it's a little bit interesting when you think of what an autoimmune condition is and this connection with the mind-body. So really getting to a place of loving yourself, accepting where you're at, accepting who you are, and learning to love yourself and not this constant critique of trying to be perfect. And look, a lot of this comes back to, once again, your past and things that may have happened to you and beliefs that you formulated when you were younger. So, I know it's quite common to see women with endo having perfectionism drives and wanting to be, perfect all the time and scolding themselves quite often when they're not and things like that. So really look at this, and I'm hoping that this is just going to plant a little seed for you, because it is a bit like an onion that you need to uncover the layers and layers and layers. But as you start uncovering that is really where I found huge shifts for myself within my own journey. So it was only once I started to explore these connections and releasing some of that pain, that emotional pain from my body, that I was able to shift the physical pain from my body. There is amazing insights on this, these connections with physical body and mind body, and the physical pain versus the emotional pain, and when you free the emotional pain, you free the physical pain. So guilt is a huge one. So if there's any guilt that you can, if you're familiar with yourself and you know that there's guilt about something, freeing that from the body makes a huge, huge difference. We can chat about this some more. So there is a support group you can check out, and I'll put the link after this, but we can chat about this some more. What sort of feelings of guilt maybe you've got holding on to. Maybe there's connections there that you can explore for yourself, and I'll give you some tools that you can use as well. Okay, so that's Affirm, and please don't dismiss this. I think a lot of us are scared to look at our emotional stuff. We don't want to look at that stuff, and so we dismiss it, or we go, it's just a physical thing. It's a physical thing. What does the mind have to do with any of this? But it's huge. It really is quite substantial, and particularly the messages you tell yourself. So if you're constantly telling yourself, I'm going to be in pain, I'm going to be in pain, I'm going to be in pain, well, guess what? You're going to be in pain. So, look at that. Look at the visualizations that you have around, endometriosis growing. Think about, like, if you've got cysts going on, really think different thoughts. I'm shrinking those cysts. The endometriosis is slowly going away. Whatever the visuals you need, and sometimes water or visuals of, flowing water through the area, something clean, those kinds of things really, really help. I've tested this with clients. It's amazing what a difference it makes. Okay, so next we move on to cleanse. And this is a huge part of the reach technique, because I think a lot of us are actually got a imbalance in the body where essentially you've got too many toxins and not enough nutrients to support your body. Now, nutrients are a way for your liver and all your various organs to detoxify. So if you don't have enough of these nutrients, well, then you're going to struggle to detoxify. Unfortunately, some of the very toxins that may be sitting in your body are inhibiting your nutrient absorption. So it's this kind of catch-22. And some of these are things like SIBO, things like Candida, things like H. pylori. You could have parasites. These guys all are a trigger for actually reducing your nutrient absorption. And so we have got protocols in place to show you how to get rid of these and how to do it naturally. Because if you have any of this stuff going on, you're going to struggle to process food, absorb the nutrients in your food. And so you will always have this losing battle of not having enough nutrients. And so you might be eating the most superb diet in the world, but if you have got an overrun of, say, SIBO, you're going to struggle to absorb them. Okay, so I'm just going to cover these a little bit more detail for you guys. So we've got SIBO, which stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And I actually think there's a huge link with this with women with endo. And the reason I say that is I'm just going to do a really simple drawing here. So, I mean, this is like really basic. But we've got the small intestine. And then we've got the large intestine. Now, if you have SIBO, what happens is these guys, the bacteria that are supposed to live in the large intestine, somehow are rebelling and decide, oh no, we are actually going to hang out in the small intestine. It's not that they're bad. I mean, they're perfectly normal bacteria, but they're just in the wrong place. And so because they're in the wrong place, they cause all sorts of problems. Gas, which you guys might know as bloating or endobelly. So you might have this going on right now. You could have just poor absorption going on, because what's happening is these guys are sucking up all the nutrients that you're eating instead of it going here where it's supposed to be absorbed into the body. So things like calcium, iron, you know, really important. But if you've got this going on, it's not going to be absorbed. Other signs include, so gas and bloating and flatulence, any sort of signs of gas. And gas actually can display as pain in the body. So you could have like distinctive pain feeling. And a lot of the time, gas kind of pain feels very kind of sharp because it's as the gas moves into a particular area. So I hear this quite often. So typically endo pain and cramping is quite a different experience. And unfortunately, everything's kind of in the same place. So it's hard to tell what's what. But oftentimes gas pain is that sharp piercing kind of pain. Not always. It could also be others. It could be adhesions or something else. But quite often it's that. Now, because you've got this SIBO situation, it also triggers histamine. And histamine is a trigger for pain. So for those of you guys who haven't seen the live presentation, I have done a live presentation all about pain and what triggers pain. So it's on my website right now. So go to endoempower.com and it's like a link on there that you can go and check out. But it explains kind of a little bit more about histamine and pain, etc. But so histamine is going to cause pain, and when you've got SIBO, this triggers these mast cells which release histamine. The other thing that's really interesting is this is often the reason for this SIBO is often because there might be an adhesion somewhere here or in the large intestine, and that is causing this movement here to be somehow limited. So for those of you who've had any kind of bowel endo or you've had surgery around the bowel area or anything like that, it's very, very likely that there is a SIBO connection here. So then, because there's this restriction, these bacteria kind of flow over into the small intestine, and that's where all of these symptoms come from. So I am looking at doing a much more intensive SIBO program. So if that's something you guys want, let me know, and I'm happy to create that, and we can do it live together, and we can do the whole thing together, because getting rid of SIBO is not an easy exercise. You can start with like really basic stuff. So you can look at taking allicin, which is the garlic version. It's not like actual garlic, it's the inside bits of the garlic, and you can do certain herbal remedies to try and remove the SIBO, but it in most cases is not that effective, and I've tried that and haven't found it to be that effective. So we can look at doing a more intensive program for that. So that's SIBO. Now, there's others. You've got Candida, and Candida, there's a huge link with Candida and endometriosis. A lot of women, once they clear up the Candida, the pain reduces. Now, Candida is a fungal overgrowth, and Candida basically thrives on sugar. So any form of sugar. It could be carbs, it can be actual sugar, it can even be fructose, so sugar from fruits. And Candida unfortunately loves mercury. So when you have mercury, high levels of mercury, then the chances of you having Candida is also going to be very high, because mercury feeds Candida. So we come back to our toxins, and that's why we look at all of them. So we look at lead, we look at SIBO, we look at Candida, we look at H. pylori, we look at parasites, we look at everything, because all of these guys will trigger the mast cells, which are essentially your inflammatory cells. So coming back to this inflammation, mast cells make pain. That's all you need to take away. Mast cells make pain, and all of those toxins in your body will create more inflammation, will create more of the pain. Okay? So, you guys still with me? I hope this isn't confusing. I feel like I'm jumping around a bit today. But the last part of the REACH technique is help. And this is actually quite important. It's about getting the right level of support around your journey. Because when you do this on your own, I know for myself, a lot of people question your choices a lot. A lot of people might question, well, why don't you just have surgery, etc. It can be very isolating. It's a very difficult condition to talk about. And when you have support with other women, you also release a hormone called oxytocin. And there's been studies on this to show how women who have been diagnosed with cancer, for instance, and they join a support group where they can openly share and share in the journey, laugh about the experiences they're having, etc., that's when they release this oxytocin and actually really supports the healing. So oxytocin is a feel-good hormone and super, super important. Now, if you can find a local support group where you're living and join that and share your story, share your experience openly without feeling judged, then that is a wonderful thing to do. I also think, having a Facebook support group as we have is a great place. We're also looking at doing live versions of that, so where women can connect with each other in a very intimate space and share the journey together. So it just makes you feel less alone, makes you feel understood, and it allows you to also see that your choices are not silly. I think sometimes we can feel like maybe this is a silly idea, maybe I can't really treat this naturally, maybe I'm being unrealistic or whatever the case is. So that can be really, really helpful, and having those support spaces for yourself where you can be truly accepted and acknowledged for your thoughts is key here, and not being judged, because then it's counterproductive. So yes, so that is essentially the reach technique and what we want to do to address inflammation, to address pain, to address endometriosis, and go beyond just diet and exercise. We want to look at the emotional connection. We want to look at eliminating those toxins. Until you eliminate these toxins, you're not going to have the best success with getting your nutrient absorption up there. We want to get this balance back, so we want to reduce the toxins and increase your nutrient absorption. That's very difficult when you've got things in your body that might be sucking up all the nutrients or deferring that nutrient absorption. Interesting things like gluten, for instance, can inhibit absorption of iron. So maybe you only just switched to a gluten-free diet, or maybe you're still on the fence about that. But gluten will inhibit absorption of iron, and therefore a lot of the factors in heavy, so if you've got heavy periods, for instance, not having enough iron can be quite common. All right, so thank you guys for watching. Thanks for being here. If you have other questions, if you want some clarification on this, I know I've jumped around a little bit today. I have days where I jump around. Other days I'm a bit more exact on what I share. But yeah, hopefully I've given you some insights. Hopefully it's given you a little bit more understanding of where you need to go with your journey. So feel free to ask me questions and share in the comments. There's also the Facebook support group. It's called Rebellious Endometriosis Sisters, and you can come and join us there if you haven't already. Okay, thank you. Bye.